Welcome to the Invincible Innovation Show, the podcast for changemakers. Each week, I talk to the most fascinating entrepreneurs and innovation leaders about innovation, strategy, and design. Hey everyone! Great to see you. Over the past decade, Israel became the home of over 370 multinational corporates that seek Israeli innovation and technology. And in the recent years, the governments joined this trend. Today, we will try to understand the reason why it's happening and why it's in Israel. I want to welcome Benny Shlick. Great to see you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Adi.
Yeah, so Benny is the founder and the managing director of Innovation Without Borders. And I want to welcome you to Invincible Innovation Live. I'm Mazor, Kario, innovation and value creation expert. And we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And you're much invited to join the discussion and ask questions. We'd really be happy if you join us. So let's start. Could you tell us what is Innovation Without Borders?
Sure. So Innovation Without Borders basically was created, I established it 4 years ago because of a clear need. As you mentioned, there was, last years, there was more and more multinational corporates entering Israel. And then in the last few years, suddenly the government, the embassies also started to understand that there's something happening here in Israel. So they appointed the representatives to lead the process of not just trade as the traditional way, but also the innovation and technology sector. And these people basically had no, let's call it home, or no guidance to the crazy ecosystem, vibrant ecosystem of Israel. So basically, Innovation Without Border, we established the diplomatic forum, and basically we help and being their home to connect them to the ecosystem players in Israel from the private and the public sector, working with over 50 embassies in Israel, with the people that lead this the processes between the countries. And it's important to understand that these people doing an amazing job, and they are actually the gatekeepers for the private sector of the countries, and their work is to make the connections, and we basically enabling them and giving them the right tools, the right methodologies, the right connections, the right infrastructure to create this and make it happen. So this is the diplomatic forum, and from that we evolve also to the Innovation Without Border Consulting, which is more kind of act as a representative and local partner in Israel for international governments and corporates, leading the strategic collaboration, open innovation processes, managing penetration to the vibrant Israeli ecosystem. So that's kind of the two main hats that we're leading under this Innovation Without Border.
That's amazing that so many countries and governments are coming here to Israel. And could you tell us, what do you think makes Israel this startup nation? Why are we so special?
So the startup nation is kind of we've been using this word for a while now, and I think it's important to understand that beyond the numbers we all familiar with and the ooha we feel when we see that we are once again among the 5 most innovative countries, top 10 most innovative countries, leading this number of investments in Israel. I think it's really important to remember that beyond these numbers, it's actually the people.
Right.
And it's really important to understand. And I've had the great pleasure of presenting Israel and presenting Innovation Without Borders globally before COVID-19, also physically from Philippines through Colombia and other places, Europe and the States. And it's interesting how everybody trying to understand what's the special thing in Israel. And it's important to understand that it's not ready-made it's not one thing that we should take and this is it, we have it. And I call it the recipe of innovation in Israel because it's different ingredients that create this great dish that everybody wants to have. And what's more important also, and I'm trying to emphasize that over and over again when I'm talking to global players, international players, is that you will never make a good hummus not in Israel or let's say in Alaska. It doesn't matter, or because
not in the Middle East. Let's say Middle East.
Exactly. So because the ingredients are different. When I'm saying ingredients are different, is the culture is different, the mentality is different, the the way we think is different. So in every country has its own. And I just think that the reason that it happened in Israel, the startup, let's call it the startup nation, is because, and I always say, is because I always say we're not smarter or better. We had no choice, basically. It's
Right.
that remember the necessity. It's overused kind of also. Necessity is the mother of innovation, which is clear. But beyond that is as Paris mentioned it in the past, obviously also is the diversity that is happening in Israel. And I think that the thing that people forgetting is that eventually innovation is business, as every other business, and it's technology. Eventually it's selling something to somebody else. But I think what's special about Israel, and beyond the nice numbers we're having, is the culture of the people in Israel. And even beyond the we all familiar with the chutzpah, the tachles, the firgun kind of sentence. But if we're speaking in a more international language, eventually Israeli people are warm people, and even in a sector of business, we're likable, we're inviting community, warm and fun, easygoing. Very little not bureaucratic, I would call official kind of interactions. So it's very different kind of mentality that allows this things to flow. But with saying that, we're still kind of very adventurous, problem solving society, risk takers, dreamers. And it's important because this is kind of the core of innovation, to make something, to change something, And of course our international background, and of course we're purpose driven. We're committed to get things done. Sometimes it feels sometimes aggressive. This is, I think, the understanding of our culture. But this is kind of it's been implemented in every sector. It's not just so it's in academia, of course, the military, and it's all mixed. So this, I can speak only about this like half an hour. About the different ingredients of the Israeli innovation. But this will be probably if one thing to take from this question is that it's not just the numbers, behind it is the people, and behind it is the culture, and I think this is the reason why we are what we are.
Yeah, I totally agree. We talked in the past, and I told you that I have a very good friend from England, and he asked me, what do you have there? Do you have like oil? Like what's going on that everybody's talking about? What's so special in Israel? And I thought about it, like why really it's happening. And then I some of the things that you said came up in the talk that I talked to him, and what you said about the culture is the way that people think entrepreneurial. So they're entrepreneurial in their inner heart because they want to change, because they are not stuck they don't have that much history within the nation, not within the
they're not settled. When you're settled, you're comfortable. When you're comfortable, nothing is really moving. When you're in your comfort zone, and everything it's pretty much okay, then nothing really changes. When you always, as I said, driven by mission, driven by change, then you always innovate, and always move forward.
And you always, like Israelis always have ideas what could be done better, and they always know better. It's like they don't question anything. I know,
or at least they think they know better.
They think,
I have a very,
of course.
I have a very interesting. When I give the talks, I have a very interesting slide that presents that the PISA exams presented this very interesting fact that on the math exams, Israel is around the number 30 in the ranking, which is very bad. But in the same exam, it was a question about how confident you feel about answering most difficult questions. And even though that by the fact, Israel is not the smartest, by fact we're not, we ranked first by far from every other country. And I think this is the kind of the essence of this kind of innovation mentality, of this self-confidence of even if I don't know, I will eventually figure out how to do it. So I think this is kind of the special thing. which is also this is something important to take from this. This is also very confusing because many countries believe that academia, it's the direct outcome of academia is innovation, and there is a big gap between this. There is a big gap between the pure academia, the pure education, which can be amazing and important, but from that to entrepreneurship, innovation, there's still way to go, because taking risk is not part of academia, and taking risk is one of the most important parts of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of a joke that a kid comes from with an exam in math and everything is wrong, and his father say, like, you didn't do anything right, it's all wrong. But he said, yeah, but it was very fast.
Good. Always look at the bright side.
Yes. So what do you think are the challenges that other countries are facing and Israel could overcome in the field of innovation?
So I think that the thing that Israel overcome in the past in terms of innovation, and I think it's everyone that who watch us can connect to that. It's is the challenge of starting something, of kicking off something, of let's take the simplest example, getting in shape. Eventually you need to do something to make it happen. So a lot of the people talk about innovation, and but eventually there's a difference between talking about it and doing it.
Right.
As a good friend of mine like to say. But it's and I think that there was in the 90s, we can look historically, in the 90s there was a huge shift in Israeli government and Israeli people regarding the openness of the government and regarding the support of the government for innovation. And basically what happened is that people started to take, as I said, because of the mentality, started to take this risk, and the government had the understanding that in order to make it happen, it has to start supporting it. So the Israel Innovation Authority started a program in the 90s that supported the most high risk to fail startups, and that basically created the first roots of successful startups, or even mid-sized successful startup, and then big-sized successful startup. But then eventually VC and foreign money started to get into the market. But what's it's like looking in a champion of it doesn't matter, a world champion in anything you can think about. Eventually you're looking at the final result. So we are now looking at the Israeli Startup Nation, top 5, top 10, but eventually there was a long process to achieve to get there. There was a risk from the governmental side, there was a risk from people's side. If you don't take risk, if you don't take this effort, then nothing really happens. So
everybody's talking about the success, but most of the startups, they don't succeed. So they're just looking at that, but there are lots of you need to pay for it in failures.
So following up, going back to your question, I think Israel is already in the flow of things is happening, where there's investments, huge money investments from foreign countries in Israeli in terms of capital, but it's not happened just in case, and just because. It happens because of hard work, because of a lot of failures that not a lot of people talk about, but probably, as you said, 90% of the startups or even more will fail. But it's not stopping the entrepreneurs to continue doing their entrepreneurial, mission to succeed. So that's kind of the thing that not necessarily all the countries understand. That eventually it's a process, and the hardest part is basically to start and to support, and in terms of government, in terms of the private person, also the risk to take this uncertain road for venture that you think should be the best one. So that will probably be the difference.
Handling uncertainty is something that Israel should know more, because we're living in some kind of a chaos, and it's like training our people to live within what we call balagan. Nothing is in place, so maybe it's part of it. Before I continue, I want to thank Samuel, who said it's very interesting. So thank you, Samuel, for joining us, and we would love for you to join and ask more questions. So what do you think, when you meet these diplomats, what are they seeking to find in the Israeli ecosystem? What are they asking you?
So we are working with the Innovation Without Border. We're working with over 50 embassies. So you can understand that it's global, different countries, different needs, different KPIs, different roles of the people. But I think the one thing that is in common to all of them will be the understanding or the will to connect their ecosystem with the Israeli ecosystem. And it can be the implemented, or the outcome can be economical, educational, learning from us, in investing, creating POC between Israeli startups and Swedish or German industry. Eventually, each one of them have different KPIs, different goals, but all of them eventually, the main goal is to connect between the ecosystem and expose, which is not least important. Today, Israeli market is quite concentrated on the US market in terms of startups. We didn't mention it, but obviously I mentioned the internationality. When you're people who are not familiar, when you're an Israeli startup, we have no market. So no Israeli startup thinking about the great success in Israel, because there is no market. So automatically the mentality is very international. So the first way to look is kind of the States, because it's language we can understand, culture kind of that I would say different, but people think very alike. And all the other countries are basically, or it's not so dramatic, but the countries are trying to put put the flashlight on their country and put the benefits of their country for the startups, and try to find the perfect match between what their country can provide and can, to this partnership, and bring the most relevant players from the Israeli side to complement it.
Yeah, I could agree. Like I'm like 20 years in the tech industry, and I could say that I met very, very few companies and startups that say our main goal is to be in, Europe. Maybe some of like fintech in UK. That's it. Everyone is talking about the US. It's like
I'm happy to tell you that it is changing now. Also because of the in purpose change of strategy of European countries, for example, to be more present, to put their country more on the to have their country in the Israeli mind. So they do need to do a lot of promotion and work and collaboration and projects, and it's working. I believe the attention is moving more and more globally, and it's starting to spread from this concentrated direction for the US only.
Yeah. It's really strange to think that they are seeking the attention of a startup in Israel, because most startups, they are like the underdogs. They're seeking the attention. They're seeking the budgets. They're seeking the VCs. They're asking for them to budget them and so forth. And it's vice versa when we think about it.
I think you're totally right. And I think it's something that have changed also in the past years, maybe even past 10 years. Having a startup, being an entrepreneur, that was not necessarily a good thing, especially not in Europe. The classical way of doing things. It's like, so you're basically risking. You have no real business model. What do you actually do? Yes. And now, because of the success, because the digitization of all the sectors, people starting to understand that they cannot be, no business can continue working without interaction with this crazy people that call entrepreneurs and bringing this new ideas, new technologies to their sector. So even the traditional, the one who kind of was like, no, we don't work with this young people who have no experience of 27 years in this field. It's the barriers are kind of falling apart.
Yeah, and you can see it like in corporate innovation, in open innovation, when like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they said, we know everything, we know how to handle this market and these clients, and we know everything, and that's just fine. And when they started to understand that if they want change and everything around them is changing, they will be left behind, they are starting to seeking these innovations from within and sometimes from the outside. And startups is like, it really makes sense for them to try to work with these people. And I think even in the mentality of like When we were young, all the mothers told their kids, you should be a doctor, you should be a dentist or a accountant, okay, more or less. And now, yeah, you should go to high tech because there's no money. I'm not sure that the mothers are really know what's the difference between high tech and startups, but in general, go and make money. It's just fine. And I think the same changes.
The mother looks at the champions, as I said. The mother looks at the one on the first, second, third place. But the process to get there, and the process to prove that this is, it took a while. This is what I'm trying to say. But now the mentality towards startups, towards innovation is very different. And as I mentioned, the government's also understanding that and trying to kind of governments creating now platforms or policies around how to create better system for startups in their governments. For example, the Philippines created something recently, and they're very active on that. So it's in other countries that you would not even think that this is any interests on their side. They're really working hard to give the space that there was none in the past for this young entrepreneurs, because they understand eventually it's economy. Eventually, as I mentioned, innovation, technology, it's nice, it's sexy, it sounds very, very, very cool. But eventually, the bottom line, especially in Israel, it's the engine of the economy of Israel. It's not just a nice thing to have. So the country has understand that and wants to implement it as well. So there's a great move in this.
Yeah, it sounds really good when you think that something which is like not relevant for other countries makes like they are starting to think, especially if you thought about it at first, like 10 years or 15 years ago, really, it's a good thing. So what makes an entrepreneur successful?
So I would emphasize on this and just mentioning that there is not just entrepreneurs, there is also entrepreneurs, and it's something that is very important. And I'm not sure about our audience, different backgrounds, but it's important to understand that
we talked about it in the past, like in the context of within or outside.
Yeah, exactly. So even an existing organization have this crazy entrepreneurs, they called entrepreneurs, but eventually they are those who have this crazy ideas and trying to push it forward against all the against all this kind of traditional, or let's say more solid people that say don't take this risk, don't. And I think it's actually answering your question. I think that what makes entrepreneurs successful is not to be afraid and to take risk. That will be the first kind of move, or the first basic instinct. No fear to ask, no fear to act, no fear to do. I think it's something that is very important. And of course, this is the first step. But then the execution is eventually having idea in your mind is great, it's a great move, first move. But having no fear to execute it and execute it in the best way, that's probably the eventually you have a great idea, you are not afraid to move with it forward, and eventually you're executing it. So and then you have the recipe for the successful entrepreneur.
So it's like you need to believe that something could be done, and you need the grit in order to stay on that path and get it executed, not only in the beginning. And I think that especially within governments, within organizations, within companies, it's so much harder because you need first to fight the existing beliefs, like everybody would tell you, like if it's not broken, don't fix it. Just leave it as is.
Exactly. It's like the traditional markets will say, why should we change if we're successful? And I think actually the COVID-19 situation now is actually highlighting the need of being more flexible, and you also mentioned the corporate innovation, and I think it's also important that it's not only within the corporates also that are innovating and trying to implement so many stories about it, and case studies of corporates acquiring startups, saying now we have the solution, but then this crazy startup needs to somehow integrate within the organization, and that is a very hard stage, especially for both sides. Just because it's different language, different mentality, different approach to things. So innovation is a struggle mostly. It looks like from this conversation, and if I need to summarize,
yeah, you're right.
It's a constant battle.
Yeah, it is. I talked to Dave from Nike, and he mentioned that taking entrepreneurs and these kind of people into the corporates is like taming an animal and placing it within the zoo and telling you, now you're leaving the zoo and you should be happy about it. And in many cases,
just act normal. Just act normal.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is what happens when you're taking a founder with his startups and the way he's thinking, and you go and you place him in a very structured, hierarchical place. And it's hard for them. Yeah. and sometimes the founders are not staying. So they come and just they pass on and they don't stay.
Yeah, and there's actually many stories of failure eventually in this collaboration, in this marriage, let's call it, because the differences are too big, and preparation from both sides is not being well done enough, and then you don't have eventually the match, which is as I said, eventually it's people, it's culture, it's kind of the same aspect.
Yeah, I think that it's like two cultures that clash when they need to match together. And if there is now like open-mindedness in order to make it work, like in marriage, it will not work. And
relationship is relationship.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when
and sometimes even the openness, looking at it from the perspective of Israelis, even the openness, even the kind of, of course, it's the warmth. Sometimes it can be translated as something is wrong, something. Yeah, it's something is not this is not the way to do it. So I think there's a layers in this. It's not.
I think that in general, people come to Israel. They think sometimes we are a bit rude. Like going into your private space.
Sometimes we are. Sometimes we are.
Yeah, you're right. But sometimes we don't mean to be, and we're interpreted as being rude. Right?
Sometimes we're too open or too honest on issues that other cultures will be more polite, I would say, or having
to talk about, right?
Sorry.
Yeah, they are more reluctant to talk about specific subjects. I had we lived in a place that we rented, and the apartment next to us, he was I think a German and American, a couple, and we met together and we had dinner, and then we said everything, like we know that the owner and his will to his sons, and they're fighting about money, and like we knew everything because we're Israelis. And I remember that in like after 5 minutes, he looked at us and like, how do you know all of that? Like, he was total shock that we know it and we talk about it. And for us, and then I thought about it. For him, it was like, it's like too personal. How do you know these like numbers? How do you know that? And it's something that
Israel, it's a small place and it's a family. It's kind of we can talk about it. It's like a big kibbutz in a way. Everybody knows, especially if you're in some specific field, it's even more narrow.
Yeah, it's really small. And we were talking about the ecosystem in Israel, all the connections between entrepreneurs and startups. It's really tight. You see, they really want to help each other, and they share their knowledge really freely and openly, which is beautiful to see.
That's one of the very important points in entrepreneurship. Eventually, it's a lot of people have these ideas for startups. They're not really entrepreneurs, but they have these ideas, and they're like, I'm not going to tell you. It's if I'm going to tell the secret kind of approach. And it's proven over and over again that the more you share, the more people will help you, the more you'll get connected, the more eventually you'll get an outcome of what you're trying to achieve. And especially in Israel. I don't know about other places, but in Israel, it's so much. Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, I think that's when in the past I were asked to sign the NDAs like a few times a week, to talk to startups and corporates, and and at a stage, that if he's very experienced, he will not ask for it because he knows the idea has no meaning. Actually, the execution is what's the
Exactly.
thing.
We're getting back to the stage of the execution eventually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. So, what is the secret of creating innovative products?
So it's kind of all the question kind of connected to the same flow. So I think creating innovative product is basically creating value and that people need and solving real challenge. Once you're in this area, this is something that eventually will be relevant. Once you're solving that something that is not, then once you're answering an existing need problem, then it's relevant for the corporates, for the people, for the users. So I think this will be the main first approach regarding
Yeah,
innovative product. Eventually, innovation. It's important to remember. Innovation doesn't, as I mentioned, it doesn't have to be something with crazy new shiny. Eventually, it can be a small move that make a big change.
right.
If we're talking about corporate approach or inside innovation or open innovation from in corporates, I mean, sometimes small things can make a big difference, and this is also innovation.
Yeah,
As
of course.
long as it falls under creating a
Yeah,
value and answering need, that will be kind of the
yeah.
basic of it.
Yeah, I think that the connection to the need, to the people who need the solution that you're building right now, is something really maybe more connected to the fact that we are so close and we always connected to what's out there. Like we are not so like people in big corporates. Sometimes they go and come back, and they are not always seeing the end customers, or they're seeing their even talking to support, or like the connection is like without any barriers, and it makes it's much easier for you to answer the needs of people that you know. And if you're so apart, it's much harder for you as an entrepreneur and someone who wants to make change. And
Definitely.
so what are the new opportunities for innovation without borders these days?
So we're still, even though the COVID-19 is here, we're still continuing our ongoing relations with our members of diplomatic forum. We have in monthly engagement and meetings that used to be physical, now on a digital way. Meeting and talking with key stakeholders in Israeli, from the private, from the governmental sector, regarding the needs of fitting to the needs of the representatives from the embassies. And parallel to that, also we have as I said, the consulting. So we're working with a few governments regarding some very interesting processes and very interesting progress that is happening, actually a bit more behind the scene. And the more kind of relevant and exciting news is that we also in very good and close touch with some very interesting and relevant entity in the Emirates, in the UAE.
Oh,
So we also
yeah, that's
have
new.
an
If
and
you're
that's
seeing us and you don't know this, we have a new agreement with the UAE. So
yeah, so it's very exciting, and it's super relevant and super interesting. And we have very interesting things coming up with this relationship, with this partnership. Unfortunately, I cannot mention the name because it was not officially published, but it will be published soon.
yeah.
So there is a lot of things happening with the Emirates, and we are super excited about it because I think the match is amazing.
Yeah. So I'm so happy that we're talking about something which is like a new beginning, looking forward to something within this very less happy stage in most people's life, and all the unknowns makes you feel like there is no real like future out there, and then you see that and
I
it's like
I think following what you're saying regarding the current situation of COVID-19, I think I look at it. It's a devastating situation for a lot of businesses, a lot of organization. But in the same time, I look at it in a way like an earthquake, and eventually then earthquake, demolishing buildings, changing situation, creating, and it's devastating. But in the same time, it creates opportunity, which is an amazing, because now that everybody was part of this earthquake, some of the less strong buildings collapse. Some of the inner looking on wider perspective, or even inside corporates, you can use this opportunity to change, especially in terms of innovation, and implement solutions, implement strategies that you were not able to do before, because now you have the necessity, and necessity, it's always better than convincing you that you should do it. Eventually, when you have the need, it's something that will allow things to move much faster. As we see now, we've been forced to do so much thing in the last half a year. And I think as bad as it is, COVID-19 in terms of innovation has an amazing opportunities for startups, and for corporates, and for governments.
Yeah, I heard somebody making the comparison, like you had the fires in the woods. So in the past, we tried to distinguish the fires, and now we know that the fires are enabling the wood to really grow again and to flourish again. So I think it could be very similar. So we're almost done, and we have so many questions that I didn't ask you, but I'll ask you the last one. So what is the most surprising thing you learned about innovation after so many years of experience?
It actually connects, and it's actually to the previous questions, and it's actually in a way concludes it. Eventually, the most common reason not to innovate, it can be from the governmental side, from the private sector side, is eventually the fear of change. And you kind of mentioned it, and I've mentioned it in the past, and this. This is kind of was and is cross sector. Everybody eventually the not to do this thing that that you should do, but you're afraid to do. This is what I've talked about, this courage, and eventually this is what's stopping so much corporates or governments or entities to innovate, because it's much better to stay in a comfort zone as they see it. But because you don't see the benefits beyond what beyond the risk.
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly.
Of course. And it's like making you think about this like change right now with COVID. Like it's a crisis, which is a very big, fast change. That's the same thing. So how will that make people think differently about change and how it could happen, and what you should do in order to be prepared, or to think differently about uncertainties and how do you handle them? So we'll I'm looking forward to see what's going on with that. So the last thing I would ask you, so what are the connections that Innovation Without Borders are seeking? Maybe some of our viewers will be interested in that.
So obviously, if you're involved in innovation, if you are here somehow and we are not aware of you and leading the innovation for your government or corporate, we'll be more than happy to be in touch. We do a lot of partnership with governments, with entities, with corporates. So that will be also very interesting. And of course, even if you're not in Israel and you're interested to better understand the market, the ecosystem, we are more than happy to assist and work on that together. And you can reach out directly on the website, or you'll find the contact there. It's straightforward.
Great. I will add the link to here, and I want to thank this LinkedIn user who said that he or she likes to learn about other cultures, and thanks us for sharing the content. So thank you too, and thank you, Benny. It's been like so much pleasure. I really enjoyed our talk.
Likewise,
it was lots of fun.
It's great. It was great to talk. Great to express the thoughts, and I hope it was productive for our audience.
Yeah, for me it was very much Thank you very much. It was very insightful. We talk within our, like, this is Israeli talking with in the middle of a sentence. And to all of you out there, change makers, innovation leaders, thank you for joining me. And I'll be here and view you and see you next time in next week. Bye bye. Bye, Benny.
Bye bye. Thank you.
I'm Mazor Kario, and you've been listening to the Invincible Innovation Podcast. Make sure to visit our website, invincibleinnovation.com, where you can learn more about our programs and my book, Innovating Through Chaos. I'll be waiting for you next week in our next episode. Thank you for listening.